Hi, good morning, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm from the Government Innovation team at Bloomberg Philanthropies, and sometimes when we hear government and innovation together, we get a few quizzical looks. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our approach to that. But first, I want to just do sort of a quick poll of the audience. How many people here know the word prototyping? Right, of course. How many people here have ever worked for a city government? Great. That's part of what we're trying to address in the Mayor's Challenge competition. So I'm going to actually start today with a little bit of a story about a failure, or perhaps not a failure, but a project that didn't go so well. So maybe don't tweet that part, because I didn't tell my boss that I was opening with a failure, so he might not let me come back to San Francisco again and present. But in 2014, we funded the city of Warsaw as part of our Mayor's Challenge for a really big idea, and that was to be the first municipal government to create a citywide wayfinding app for blind and visually impaired people. And now, like all big ideas, that idea had a lot of assumptions baked into it. And one of those assumptions was that blind people would want very precise and constant prompts, take 10 steps forward, turn right. And that was based on seeing people's assumptions based on their experience with GPS systems. And they even asked some blind and visually impaired people, how does that sound? And they said, yeah, that system sounds pretty good. So what happened? They spent a lot of time and money investing in developing this system, and they worked with a lot of technology developers to create that system. And then they started their user testing once they had something to show. It was like being blind twice. Always great to hear as a funder of a big idea. But when they started the user testing, the overwhelming feedback that they received from the blind and visually impaired people was that they really rely on their sound to orient themselves. And they're good at micro-navigation. What they wanted was something called situational awareness. So if you're standing at the bus stop, the bus is 2 minutes away. Then once you're on the bus, you're now approaching City Hall. And so these constant prompts were overwhelming their senses. And the city of Warsaw really had to shift their approach and go back to the drawing board, and this time co-develop that solution with blind and visually impaired people. And I'm happy to report that Tomasz Paktwa is the biggest advocate for user testing and prototyping. So that's a really big success story. And you might ask yourself, how did they miss something that's so fundamental to the success of this idea? It seems so obvious in retrospect. But this is something that we've heard time and time again. At Bloomberg Philanthropies, we work with hundreds of cities around the world, and there's just so much fear in trying something new that they really want to wait until they planned every single detail out. They want to check every box, cross every T, dot every I. And they do all this planning primarily behind closed doors. People in city government, we're the experts. So we're going to sit behind the closed doors and do all of that planning. And as many of you in this room know, the private sector's approach to that is very, very different. The private sector starts with a prototype, with a sketch, with a mock-up. They use those low-cost things to test assumptions that are built into new ideas. And that helps them to refine and learn and adapt in low-stake ways before they put a significant amount of time and energy into a fully functional product. And I think we're starting to see a little bit of those concepts bleed over into the public sector as it relates to technology deployments, but people who are thinking about how to better serve their homeless populations, how to think about how to get better early childhood education outcomes or reduce recidivism, the prevailing sentiment in the public sector is experimentation is just too risky. Well, at Bloomberg Philanthropies, we're really trying to turn this notion on its head and understand how experimentation and testing in low-cost, small ways can be used to de-risk investments. So Bloomberg Philanthropies Mayor's Challenge is an ideas competition for cities. We invest in new ideas that solve big challenges and ideas that can have impact locally, and then once they have proven the model, can spread to other cities. We've been running the Mayor's Challenge since 2013. It's a regional competition. We put out a broad call for ideas. Cities, we select finalists, and then cities refine their ideas over time. And then ultimately, we select 5 winners. 1 grand prize winner that receives $5 million to bring its idea to life, and 4 others that receive $1 million. And many of you are probably familiar with prize competitions and challenges. You're probably instigators of them, competitors of them. Some of you are probably winners of them. And so in this round of the Mayor's Challenge, we've tried to practice what we preach to cities a little bit and step back and say, okay, what have we learned from our past competitions to make this even more impactful? So in this round of the Mayor's Challenge, we've evolved our model in a way that we believe will have even more impact. We want more of those cities to have aha moments. We want them to have them earlier, and we want to have them before we and their city governments are investing in them to scale. So we're trying to give them the space through this competition to do what the private sector does pretty regularly, which is to intentionally test and question their ideas, to fail, to pivot, and to propose better ideas that will be stronger and more ready to implement in the end. So these are the 35 cities that we've selected as our finalists in this year's competition, and we've introduced what we're calling a test and learn phase. And that's a 6-month phase, and we're providing all of these 35 cities with $100,000 and a design coach to help them prototype, test, and learn before they make a final application to us with a case for further investment. And in that, we're gonna ask this: what went wrong? What evolved? You know, if your idea hasn't evolved, we're gonna be a little bit skeptical. And really for us, this test and learn phase is synonymous with prototyping, what would be called prototyping in the private sector. We're just trying to de-jargon it for a little bit because we get a lot of funny looks when we say prototyping to mayors. And so here you're gonna see some photos from this experiment that's happening across the country. And getting cities to do things like storyboards, to make cardboard cutouts of their ideas and actually test these things. We had an ideas camp in New York in March where we get cities together and have them test their ideas with one another. And at first they really struggle with it, but then they start doing it and they start experimenting and they really see the value and say, oh, I never thought about it that way. So just a couple quick examples from things cities are learning in this testing phase. Georgetown, Texas is the first city to be operated on 100% renewable energy. But they want to take that process one step further and have all of that energy generated locally. So they're trying to create what they're calling a virtual power plant by leasing the rooftops of residential buildings to put solar panels on them. And now they had a test with senior citizens, because a lot of the senior citizens are the homes that they're targeting for this intervention. And so they asked these senior citizens, if we paid you a small fee, would you allow us to install a solar panel on your roof? 100% of the people in the room said no. And we know that how you frame and communicate your idea in cities is sometimes make or break. They asked those same residents, if installing a solar panel on your roof would make our city more resilient in the face of a natural disaster, would you do it? 100% of the same people said yes, and they also said they would pay for the cost of installation themselves. So it's a small thing, but think about the difference in how they would implement and roll out that idea. And in addition to having these aha moments earlier about the ideas themselves, we're starting to see a ripple effect in the prototyping phase, creating a broader culture of innovation within cities. Cities are starting to prototype their ideas and working in more collaborative and participatory ways, engaging residents that they wouldn't normally engage, reaching out to people from other departments. And it's really creating buy-in inside City Hall and outside City Hall to have momentum for these ideas to be successful and for them to be sustained. We're also starting to see this happen on other policy areas. Cities who are using the prototyping phase to introduce a new service or idea, they're thinking, I could prototype a policy. I was at a conference recently with Rick Cole, the manager of Santa Monica, and he was telling me how they're prototyping a new policy about Bird, the electric scooters, and how they're going to do that. And he said, we don't know how this is going to work, so let's try something for 3 months. That's a really big revolution for city governments. We're also seeing a really big shift in cities from thinking about tech first to human first. So for a lot of times for city, technology happens to them. They think about, how are autonomous vehicles going to be plug and play in my city? What about drones? What about blockchain technology? These are all things that our Mayor's Challenge cities are testing. And when they get in, they realize there's a lot of wariness around these new technologies and a real need to think about how is this going to affect the citizens, and a lot of need to socialize that new technology before it's too late or before they're implemented. So what's next? Our cities will conclude their testing phase this summer and resubmit final applications in August. We'll announce our winners at City Lab in Detroit in October. If you'd like to learn more about any of our Mayor's Challenge ideas, you can visit our website at mayorschallenge.bloomberg.org. We're going to be posting updates from all 35 cities, not only the things that go well, but the things that they've learned, how they're pivoting, and how they're moving forward. So, I would just say this is more about just investing in great ideas and making sure our investment goes as far as possible. It's about making a public case for why cities should be using prototyping to test and refine new ideas before funders and the cities invest in them to scale. And we hope that this is just the beginning. We hope that soon it will be the rule and not the exception that cities are using prototyping to test and refine new ideas. And I would really encourage all of you as social innovators, social innovation investors, to be engaging with your cities and your city halls to bring that expertise to bear. So thank you very much.